The ladle shook faintly in Unaritzia Karl Hoffmann's grasp as he raised it toward his lips, savoring genuine milk after a 2-year absence. Authentic milk, unlike the dehydrated version that had turned routine in the Afrika Korps starting from 1941. The rich, velvety flavor gliding over his palate directly challenged every claim the Wehrmacht had made regarding U.S. supplies. In his secret diary, tucked away under his bunk, he jotted down thoughts that could have drawn severe reprisals from the Nazi commanders in his quarters. The U.S. nourishes its captives more generously than Germany sustains its troops. June 4, 1943, Mexia, Texas. Peering out from the dining area's panes at the recently established site 4 miles outside the settlement, he observed U.S. sentries leisurely munching on hearty sandwiches packed with beef. Back in the Afrika Korps, their group had endured on 300 grams of preserved meat and 125 grams of tough loaf per day as their standard sustenance, occasionally boosted by seized British provisions if fortune smiled. But in this land that Nazi broadcasts had painted as frail from Jewish meddling and lax governance, provisions seemed boundless. That day, 850 survivors from Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's famed Afrika Korps streamed into the cafeteria. No makeshift field setup with its 2-horse goulash cannon dispensing thin broth, no grit-laced allotments from North Africa's dunes, but a complete eatery boasting powered coolers, heated serving lines, and mechanized cleaning stations. Every cluster of 5 dorms featured its own dining space, staffed by chefs, servers, utensils, and by reports, excellent cuisine. The whole community of Mexia had gathered to witness their entrance, gawking at the sun-bronzed, robust foe troops parading along Railroad Street. Unbeknownst to onlookers, this morning meal would ignite the deepest mental upheaval in the annals of wartime captivity. The methodical unraveling of Nazi ideology on race, achieved merely through the routine of dining. Figures from U.S. farming output weren't disseminated via flyers, but presented on steel platters brimming with scrambled eggs, strips of pork, soft loaves, spreads, preserves, and authentic brew. Their beliefs would erode not solely from battlefield losses, but from routine encounters with unimaginable abundance. The path leading here had started on May 13, 1943, in Tunisia. General Jürgen von Arnim, Rommel's successor after the Desert Fox's transfer back to Europe, capitulated with roughly 275,000 German and Italian troops. The Afrika Korps, which had pushed the British to Cairo's doorstep and won reluctant admiration from Montgomery, found itself abruptly imprisoned. In their ranks was Oberfeldwebel Franz Müller, bearer of the Iron Cross Second Class, campaigner in Poland and France, endure of 2 desert years in North Africa. His record, unearthed years afterward in the National Archives, offered scholars the richest portrayal of German troops' dietary astonishment during U.S. detention. We'd subsisted on 750 grams of loaf, 150 grams of grease, and 120 grams of link or preserved seafood each day when deliveries arrived, he noted. Far more frequently, we got by on palms, looted stores, or utter scarcity. The shift from loss to enlightenment kicked off in the holding pens near Tunis. As Mueller and 30,000 fellow detainees lingered in temporary enclosures awaiting vessels, U.S. supply chains were already upending their assumptions. The American forces handled thousands of captives each day with an efficiency that outstripped the Wehrmacht's finest organizational feats at its zenith, yet provisions struck the initial emotional hit. Feldwebel Hans Klein, seized alongside the 15th Panzer Division, penned to his spouse 6 months on from Camp McCain in Mississippi. In those Tunis enclosures as we awaited transport, the Americans handed out pale loaves with our portions. Pale loaves. In Africa, we'd gnawed on nekebrat, a dense, brittle, full-grain biscuit, if luck held. The U.S. watchman devoured more bakery at one sitting than my unit had in 7 days. The Liberty ships ferrying them over the ocean stood as emblems of American efficiency. These crafts, churning out at 3 daily during maximum output, looped back from resupplying Europe's fronts. Detainees typically sailed in these returning hulls, which would have lain vacant otherwise, with up to 30,000 docking monthly. Instead of the livestock transports they had anticipated, they encountered adapted cargo bays fitted for passengers, complete with airflow, illumination, and adequate restrooms. The transatlantic voyage in July 1943 marked the next wave of gastronomic surprise. Gerhard Wilhelm Becker, from the 21st Panzer Division, maintained a ration log that endured through post-war correspondence to relatives: morning fare, porridge sweetened with sugar and dairy, pale loaf slathered in spread, brew laced with cream, he recorded on July 15th. Such fare was reserved for brass in the homeland, not rank and file. Still, in this place, we captives too partook. The Germans were astounded by the cuisine offered on those vessels. They learned that U.S. merchant mariners enjoyed steaks, eggs, crisp produce, and even ice cream. Ice cream, no less, a treat in Germany limited to top Nazi leaders. The onboard stores held more nourishment than what full German platoons got in their everyday allotments. Lieutenant Heinrich Wibber, from a Prussian lineage that had defended the nation since Frederick the Great's era, reflected in his private recollections, "As we neared the U.S. shoreline, I observed crew members discarding nearly untouched repasts, whole suppers tossed into the sea. My thoughts turned to my troops in Africa, who cherished a few dates and murky water, and it dawned on me that our conflict wasn't merely against foes, but against a whole society we couldn't grasp." On August 2, 1943, at Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia, the initial feast on U.S. territory demolished the final illusions from Nazi tales of American frailty. Once in the States, the luxury of the Pullman rail cars transporting them to detention sites left them in awe, as did the nation's vast expanse and untouched affluence. Yet nothing braced them for the abundance ahead. During intake, they received a spread that seemed unbelievable: fried chicken, creamy mashed potatoes drizzled in gravy, tender green beans, cornbread, apple pie, and coffee sweetened with genuine sugar. Unteroffizier Johann Fischer, raised by a Munich baker, noted in his journal that this one serving packed more protein than his household's entire monthly quota back home. The hosts even expressed regret that the fare was basic since their visit was unannounced. Fischer recorded, "They said sorry for a banquet that would have thrilled German commanders. In that instant, our illusions full folly hit home. The rail trip from Norfolk to facilities in Texas and Oklahoma would erode Nazi beliefs more than any battlefield loss." As the cars traversed Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, the captives stared out at a landscape defying Goebbels' rhetoric. At each halt, they saw rail staff munching hearty beef subs, sipping Coca-Cola from bottles, and puffing smokes freely, untouched by shortages. In Memphis, Tennessee, they gawked while a diner was stocked with new supplies: beef haunches, egg cartons, potato burlap bags, veggie crates. The haul for that single locomotive surpassed a month's provisions for whole German brigades in Africa. Stabsschreiber Rudolf Richter, a pre-draft farm evaluator from Westphalia, chronicled the spectacle. U.S. rail lines shifted enough daily grub to feed the whole Reich. I spotted grain-laden boxcars, chilled units hauling beef and dairy, dedicated consists shuttling harvests from fields to urban hubs, no armed escorts, no fortified safeguards, just endless streams of sustenance like steady currents. By September 19, 1943, at Camp Hearn in Texas, settling into long-term sites delivered another blow to their worldview via provisions. America aimed to provide optimal conditions for POWs for dual purposes: to secure fair handling for captured Yanks and to sway the German detainees, future architects of a rebuilt post-war continent. The dining areas surpassed pre-war norms for most Wehrmacht members. Buzzing electric fridges ran nonstop. Mechanical washers sanitized heaps of dishes. Vapor warmers held dishes hot indefinitely. Heavy-duty kneaders whipped up batter for daily loaves. Per Geneva protocols, POWs merited sustenance, garb, and health services matching their guards. At Camp Swift, Texas, Unteroffizier Karl Hoffmann drew mess hall shifts. His findings there lingered in his mind for years. On September 23rd, we discarded 300 pounds of leftovers, he jotted, not ruined items, but extras from generous prep. U.S. rules mandated 10% overage to guarantee ample helpings for all. The excess got cleared out. The kitchen's ration chart resembled a dream. 3/4 pound of protein daily, 1 pound of spuds, 1/2 pound of greens, 3/4 pound of loaf, alongside sweets, brew, dairy, spread, and yolks. Washington oversaw POW feeding costs meticulously, with growers using inmate workers at 45 cents hourly to ease the vast expenses of the captive initiative. Feldwebel Hans Klein, then at Camp McCain in Mississippi, described, "Mornings bring porridge or flakes with dairy and sweetener, fluffy eggs, streaky bacon, buttered slices with preserves, brew with froth. Midday offers protein, always, paired with sides, tubers, or grains, rolls, and sweets. Evenings feature additional cuts, more produce, broth, loaves, and joe. Weekends deliver fowl or bird with classic fixings." The captives began to uncover American military provisions greatly surpassed the allocations given to German civilians even prior to the conflict. By 1942 and 1943, those civilian allotments in Germany had fallen to just 2,178 calories, dropping further to 1,181 calories during 1943 and 1944. In contrast, German POWs in U.S. facilities enjoyed more than 3,000 calories each day. The setup at Camp Clinton in Mississippi, home to the most senior German commanders, including 25 generals, stood out even more strikingly. General von Arnim, who succeeded Rommel, resided in a private home complete with a vehicle and chauffeur. These high-ranking officers employed personal chefs and could order customized dishes. They savored cuts of steak, oven-roasted poultry, newly caught seafood, and produce unseen by ordinary Germans since 1940. Yet the standard fare for regular troops left the captives equally astonished. Oberfeldwebel Franz Müller reported from Camp Shelby, "For midday, we savored deep-fried catfish freshly pulled from Mississippi waterways, paired with slaw, cornmeal fritters, crispy cornbread, tender green beans, and peach dessert. The African-American troops serving us consume identical provisions. Back home, we'd heard tales of Americans letting their black citizens go hungry." Yet another false narrative debunked. October 1943. Come fall, German POWs began laboring on U.S. agricultural lands, and the sights they encountered there shattered the last remnants of Nazi farming legends. Starting in 1943, when substantial groups of these prisoners started arriving, and continuing through the war's close in 1945, those in Texas gathered peaches and citrus, reaped rice crops, felled timber, bundled fodder, separated cereals, and collected nuts. On a milk operation near Huntsville, Texas, Unteroffizier Ernst Wagner observed in shock as the owner discarded vast quantities of milk, hundreds of gallons, since the facility couldn't manage the overflow. He simply let it soak into the soil without a second thought. Wagner noted, "This liquid that German parents would plead for to feed their kids now watered the fields." Upon voicing my objection, the owner clarified it was mere overabundance. Flooding the market would ruin the pricing. Roughly 12,000 such captives were confined in Nebraska facilities. They toiled right alongside the fields, piling bales and tending sugar beet patches. Gefreiter Paul Schmidt served on a maize operation and observed, "The owner's hens devour kernels freely. The barn felines get poured fresh cream every day. The hounds receive meat bits that could feed a German household for a week." U.S. growers hiring POW assistants frequently welcomed them to join family suppers. Such sharing broke no rules provided an overseer was nearby. Those gatherings in rustic farm dining areas probably struck the deepest emotional chord. Landowners securing POW help typically supplied their sustenance, and those feasts were extravagant, trays brimming with crisp poultry, spuds mashed and laced with dairy, legumes simmered alongside pork, ears of maize glistening in butter, fluffy scones under sauce, assorted pastry types, pitchers of chilled dairy, and bottomless brews. Christmas 1943. The festive banquet hit with a mental blow from which numerous detainees never fully bounced back. At Camp Hearn, Texas, the Yuletide spread seemed like pure fantasy. Baked fowl filled with herbs, glazed pork shank and honey, creamy tubers under organ sauce, sugared yams, fresh legumes, maize kernels, tart relish, warm loaves slathered in spread, fruit mince tart, squash custard, fruit pastry alongside frozen cream, brew, dairy, and spiced juice. Feldwebel Hans Klein described from Camp McCain, We gorged ourselves to the point of sickness, not due to poor quality, but sheer volume. Our digestive systems, shaped by prolonged scarcity, couldn't handle the load. Some broke down in tears mid-bite, minds on famished loved ones overseas. The gap with homeland provisions was glaring. Captives in domestic facilities got 9 pounds of tubers weekly, plus 5 pounds of loaf and 2.5 pounds of greens, sprinkled with tiny bits of spread and Ersatzbrew from nuts. By comparison, German POWs stateside savored sustenance levels not felt since before the turmoil. March 1944. With the season's thaw, camp provisions grew even more extraordinary. Crisp greens arrived fresh each day. Leafy greens, ripe fruits, vine produce, root veggies, tubers, stalks. Tropical and citrus delights that felt like forbidden treasures back home. Citrus spheres, tangy globes, curved yellows, red berries when ripe. The sheer assortment dazed those used to bland barrack meals. On-site ovens churned out loaves every morning, refined, hearty grains, seeded varieties, or whatever suited the crew. Detainees in the baking units mentioned consuming more grain in one shift than entire German operations got monthly. Unteroffizier Johann Fischer, offspring of a baker, joined the camp Swift ovens. He recounted, "For our section only, we turn out 500 units of bread per day. We craft sweets, layers, biscuits for events. The sweetener for our daily treats could stock a homeland oven for seasons." Summer 1944. The Normandy assault on June 6th signaled Germany battling across 3 theaters. Still, the nourishment landscape conditions for German prisoners in American POW camps stayed steady. In fact, they often got better as additional inmates were put to work on farms, getting a direct look at the roots of U.S. wealth. In Nebraska's sugar beet fields, captives learned that farmers in a single county grew more beets than multiple regions back in Germany combined. Over in Arkansas at a processing plant, inmates saw heaps of flawless peaches tossed aside just for slight surface flaws. At the same time, in Washington State's Fort Lewis, another batch of German POWs underwent comparable eye-openers. One of them was 18-year-old G.A. Grayo, who showed up in August 1944, following his capture in Normandy. While standing before the camp store in August or September 1944, debating between grabbing an ice cream or a Coca-Cola bottle, he later noted, "The last ice cream I'd managed to purchase in Germany was ages ago, and I'd never even tried Coca-Cola before, so I chose them both. It hit me then just how fortunate I was to get taken by the U.S. forces instead of the Soviets." By September 1944, after over a year behind bars, numerous German POWs had packed on 20 to 30 pounds. Health checks indicated upgrades in every area, including healthier teeth thanks to consistent milk intake, sturdier frames from sufficient protein, and smoother complexions from nutrients in fresh produce and fruits. Dr. Friedrich Bauer, a detained German doctor at Camp Shelby in Mississippi, recorded this shift in well-being. The arrivals were underfed, with plenty battling scurvy, pellagra, and various nutrient shortages. 1 year into U.S. meals, they were fitter than ever before. Their bodily changes were striking. The mental effects ran even further. Gerrit Wilhelm Becker observed, "Talk of German triumph has faded. How could we overcome a country that nourishes captives so generously, even as it fights on several battlegrounds? Such vast supplies point to an unbeatable edge." Come December 1944, amid the Ardennes counterattack, Germany's final big push, holiday meals in U.S. POW camps outdid the prior year's spreads: turkey, ham, roast beef, plus all the usual sides, along with extras. Fruitcakes from U.S. bakeries, peppermint sticks, chocolate, the genuine kind, not the ersatz turnip-based stuff that had become routine in Germany, nuts, and fresh produce. In Mississippi's Camp Clinton, Italian POWs who had switched loyalties, post-Italy's capitulation, got to whip up festive pasta specialties. The Germans observed their ex-partners, now teaming with Americans, cooking with staples like olive oil, authentic cheese, and refined flour that had disappeared from home tables long ago. On May 8, 1945, marking VE Day, the conflict ended, yet the food insights persisted. German POWs found out that during the whole war, regular Americans had dodged harsh rationing. Beef was capped, sugar and coffee curbed, but no one knew real deprivation. The U.S. farming backbone remained unscathed by conflict. In May 1945, the Provost Marshal General's office cut back provisions and halted canteen snack sales. Public grumbles claimed the inmates dined too lavishly. Despite the cuts, German POWs still ate better than folks in Germany would for years to come. Once tallied, the figures laid bare a clear reality. German POWs in the U.S. averaged 3,200 calories daily. Frontline German troops got a nominal 3,600 calories if deliveries made it through, which grew rarer. By 1945, German citizens scraped by on under 1,112 calories a day. U.S. facilities doled out about 3/4 of a pound of meat per inmate each day. German forces' weekly allowance featured 120 grams of sausage or canned fish, if procurable. This gap between U.S. abundance and German want stood as the strongest rebuttal to Nazi doctrine, delivered not by rhetoric but by routine encounters. During summer 1945, as German POWs readied for return home, plenty pleaded to stay in America. They had seen a farming setup that reshaped their views on feasibility. Hans Wucker, held at Nebraska's Fort Robinson, remembered later, "Camp existence marked a huge step up for lots of us raised in unheated German apartments. We encountered indoor plumbing, warmth from central systems, and plentiful eats. Our handling was top-notch. The orientation effort scored biggest via the chow, not the talks. Daily, German inmates faced proof that debunked Nazi claims of American frailty. Each full stomach undermined old notions of ethnic dominance and system flaws." Dr. Walter Schreiber, once a Wehrmacht colonel and farm specialist. After the war, one observer remarked, "The provisions supplied by America to German captives could have supported the whole German Sixth Army during Stalingrad. Their farming excess would have nourished every corner of occupied Europe. We failed to grasp that we were up against a country which had cracked the core challenge of human survival, ensuring food for all." From 1945 to 1946, a total of 383 German POWs were sent back home from U.S. facilities. They arrived in a ruined, split, and famished Germany. Yet they carried back priceless insights, that wealth was within reach, that a community could sustain its people fully, and that democratic frameworks could yield plenty instead of disorder. Numerous ex-captives went on to spearhead West Germany's farming overhaul. Hans Müller, held at Camp Shelby, brought U.S. cultivation techniques to Bavaria, boosting harvests by 40% in just 5 years. Wilhelm Fischer, from Camp McCain, aided in setting up supply chains inspired by American practices. Friedrich Bauer pushed for dietary guidelines drawn from what he'd seen in U.S. detention centers. Post-return, roughly 5,000 Germans moved to the United States, with thousands others eager to follow had visas allowed. They pursued not only jobs, but the reliable nourishment they'd encountered behind bars. In October 1947, at Fort Lewis in Washington, one of the final German POWs to leave was Ga Gray, after 3 years in custody. Years afterward, he came back to the U.S. as a thriving entrepreneur. Still, he cherished the memory of that instant in the camp mess hall, picking between ice cream or Coca-Cola, indulgences his relatives back home could scarcely imagine. "We received equitable treatment, ample rations, and 80 cents daily, allowing purchases of smokes, candy bars, frozen treats, and Coke," he penned 73 years on. Items his mother and sister in Germany longed for in vain. By 1985, in Austin, Texas, more than 500 ex-POWs gathered for the 40th anniversary event, many with loved ones in tow, to point out the site of their awakening. Ex-POW Carl Hoffman, 78 and a U.S. citizen since 1955, gave a talk summing up their journey. "We arrived in America as Third Reich fighters, steeped in notions of ethnic dominance, sure that U.S. democracy was frail. We left as bearers of a deep revelation. The U.S. thrived on farm output, not ethnic exclusivity. Each bite in those camps upended our convictions. The Yanks nourished us, their foes, more generously than Hitler did his troops. Their overabundance led to everyday discards. This was no taunt, just plain fact. We realized a country that provisions its adversaries effortlessly has won real triumph. Such a civilization had conquered want in ways the Third Reich never managed. Back in Germany, we knew our outlook rested on lies. The U.S. triumphed via superior farming and manufacturing might. We, once invaders, were reshaped by beholding plenty we couldn't fathom. To America, from ex-adversaries, thanks for showing power flows from building, not ruining. You sustained us while we'd have let you perish. That kindness marks real might. The hall filled with prolonged cheers. Yanks and Germans, once at odds, now bonded in honoring a shift sparked by an ordinary supper in June 1943. The tale of German POWs and U.S. provisions reveals how deep shifts can arise from lived encounters, not debates. Those troops who saw American farming prowess turned into vivid proof of democracy's tangible wins. Their change started with routine suppers, not speeches, with tangible proof, not slogans. Every serving undermined Nazi doctrine more potently than any lesson plan. The shift ran so deep that when ex-POW Guy Graveway revisited Fort Lewis in 2017 at 91, he biked around the grounds bearing placards. USA, the land and its folks, you are my first and lasting affection. It was August 1944 when I first arrived here as a POW. We always got fair handling, plenty of meals and 80 cents a day. That let us snag cigarettes, chocolate, ice cream, and Coca-Cola. Stuff my mom and sister in Germany could only wish for. That's why I'm back after 73 years to declare, thank you, America. I'll always remember. Colonel William Purcell, Deputy Garrison Commander at Joint Base Lewis McChord, welcomed him saying, you show us that our treatment of others shapes our identity. Even now we might wish to overlook it sometimes, but you remind us it's a truth worth holding on to. The German POWs encountered American agriculture. The prisoners of war arrived with deep-seated resentment and emerged utterly transformed by their encounters. They entered as adversaries, left as observers, and numerous ones came back later as settlers and allies. Their offspring would grow up in a free Germany partnered with the United States, a bond forged from insights derived from unforeseen kindness. The facilities themselves vanished almost entirely in physical form. Following the conflict, most were taken apart. Structures were auctioned off or torn down, with the sites repurposed for farming or other purposes. Yet their influence persisted in the recollections of participants and in Germany's subsequent democratic revival. The Marshall Plan, aimed at nourishing and restoring Europe, carried forward the principles gleaned from those P camps. That compassion, amid triumph, fosters enduring harmony. Ex-prisoners who thrived in after-war Germany frequently attributed their shift to their time in American camps as pivotal. They had observed affluence generated via collaboration, not domination. Diverse groups laboring effectively side by side, democratic mechanisms yielding riches instead of disorder. These insights, gained from routine life, surpassed any abstract instruction in impact. Dr. Arnold Kramer, the foremost scholar on German POWs in the U.S., asserted, the United States prevailed in the ideological struggle not via shrewd rhetoric, but via tangible existence. Each serving of food, each illuminated bulb, each functional restroom served as a rebuttal to Nazism. The POWs were swayed by the wealth they could perceive, handle, and savor. Figures capture just a fraction of the narrative. Indeed, 371,983 German POWs were detained in America. Indeed, they contributed 14 million man-days to farm work. Indeed, under 1% tried to flee, but the core tale resides in personal evolution sparked by adequate nourishment paired with respectful conduct. Contemporary scholars assessing post-war German democracy's triumphs frequently highlight the Marshall Plan, denazification efforts, or the Soviet menace. Yet they occasionally neglect the 370,000 German troops who went home after living American democracy as routine provision, equitable handling even as foes, and communal resources rather than selfish stockpiles. These individuals turned into advocates for democracy, each shaping relatives, acquaintances, and neighborhoods through their stories. They had resided inside the alleged rival framework and deemed it superior across all accessible aspects. This irrefutable truth undermined Nazi doctrine more potently than any outreach effort. As the final German POW sailed from U.S. ports in 1946, they bequeathed an extraordinary legacy. The minimal escape rate among any large POW group in history, the peak level of willing collaboration with overseers, and the greatest success in converting hostile fighters into eventual partners, all attained not via severity or aggressive messaging, but via basic decency and plentiful provisions. The commitment America invested in sustaining its captives via farming assets and supply chains generated boundless benefits. Hundreds of thousands of Germans who directly encountered democracy, who grasped that U.S. might stemmed from productive prowess rather than ethnic dogma, who saw Nazi claims as utter deceit. Ultimately, the German POW's time in America demonstrated that genuine authority rests in generating and distributing plenty. The reality that America nourished its opponents superior to how Germany sustained its troops exposed core disparities between systems that no rhetoric could mask. The German POWs reached American soil anticipating frailty and discord. Rather, they uncovered boundless farming and manufacturing prowess allied with unexpected compassion. They arrived as captives, yet sailed away as testifiers to democratic success. Within their change rested the origins of the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and a renewed free Germany. They had tasted American abundance, and it remained etched in memory. Their descendants would flourish in thriving democratic Germany, connected to the United States, part of NATO, and integrated into the European Union. All linked partly to that instant when famished Africa Corps members savored their initial U.S. Repassed and realized their worldview rested on falsehoods. Sustenance shaped the conflict's resolution as profoundly as any armament. Repasts captured loyalties as thoroughly as any clash, and in that success rested the bedrock for sustained tranquility, erected not on intimidation, but on the vow of mutual affluence. The German POWs were astonished by American camp meals surpassing their allocated vermin-infested portions, and from that astonishment sprang renewal. In their renewal resided optimism for a globe where past foes might evolve into companions, where democracy could prevail not by coercion, but via the groundbreaking deed of providing for all, including those who arrived as aggressors.